This week's episode is with Mike Spinnler, who for more than 30 years has been the race director of the JFK 50, the oldest continuously running ultramarathon in the country. Mike has been connected to the JFK 50 since he first lined up at age 12. He's won it, set the record, and for more than 30 years has been the race director. So that also makes him the longest continuously running race director of the oldest continuously running ultramarathon in the country. But before we jump into the conversation, I do need to give a slight disclaimer. Normally, we edit the episode and we trim extraneous lines of inquiry, tangents that we might go on, and we tighten answers because we respect your time as the listener. But after having our conversation with Mike, that just didn't feel right. We gave him an outline, asked the first question, and he just took off. He kept going, naturally leaving one story into the next, covering our entire agenda in almost one breath, and touching every part of the race's history, community, and meaning. That's one of the amazing things about Mike, is that after decades at the heart of this event, he doesn't run out of stories or care for others. You'll hear his wisdom, humor, and his love for what the JFK 50 represents, not just as a race, but as something that brings out the best in people, whether that's the volunteers, the runners themselves, and the community at large. Mike also talked with us about leaving a legacy, how Buzz Sawyer, the race's first director, and his coach, Greg Schenk, shaped him deeply, and how he's just been doing the best he can to follow in their footsteps. It's clear from the conversation that Mike is reluctant to see himself as a legend in his own right, and that if any legendary status is owed to him, it's because of how he tries to emulate others that he deeply admired and respected. But to Molly and I, what makes him legendary is something else entirely. It's hidden in plain sight, and it's his unfailing kindness and his uncommon pursuit to help others be the best that they can be. It's our hope that as you listen, that you'll see what we saw. That Mike Spinnler is not simply someone who emulates great role models, but someone who, if more of the world were like, we might feel a little less divided. So yes, this episode is long, and I have made it longer with this introduction. We could have cut it down, but doing so would have taken away from the spirit of this conversation and why it mattered not only to us having it, but why we think it could matter to you. If hearing Mike doesn't inspire you to want to run an ultra, line up at the JFK 50 one day, or think about the kind of impact a single person can have on a community, we're not sure what will. Okay, this is our first dual in-person plus remote episode.
Yeah.
So we're breaking new ground, much like I did when I ran JFK 50 for the first time a couple years ago. We are joined today by Mike Spinnler, whose connection to JFK 50 spans several decades, including when he first lined up for the race when you were 12, right? I think you were.
That is correct. I was 12 years old.
And you had a great race, but he didn't win. And this was something that really mattered to Mike. Came back to win it a couple of times, including breaking the course record. And this is a race that clearly has a deep connection for Mike. And it's also a race that a lot of people in the running community and the ultra community have a deep connection to. And so today we're really excited to have this conversation with you, Mike. Really appreciate having you on. It's the oldest continuously running ultramarathon in the country. And to have it last this long with the tradition that it has is something that we're really excited to talk with you about, and how you've been this great steward of the race. And so if we could first just have you open up and introduce a bit about yourself and your running background before we get into the race itself, that would be, I think, a great place to start.
Michael was what my mother called me when she was mad at me. Everybody else calls me Mike. Mike Spinnler, and I'll be 67 years old for this year's JFK. Next month I turn 67, and I've been involved with the event since 1971 when I first participated as a 7th grader, a 12-year-old. And I got involved with running mainly because of my older brother. There's a wide span. My oldest brother, there's 7 siblings, and I'm the youngest. And my oldest brother was an outstanding cross-country and track and field runner at Catawba College down in North Carolina in the late 1950s and early 60s. And I knew virtually nothing about long-distance running, but he came from his home in California to come visit us at our home in Frederick, Maryland, which was only miles from the starting line in Boonesboro. And we were like, well, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm here to win this 50-mile race. And then he showed us this article. It was actually a little blurb in Faces in the Crowd about Baxter Berryhill, who'd won the race in 1970 and about breaking the course record. And that my brother, had an entry for him, and he kind of informed us about this event that he was going to do. And he was turning 30 years of age, and he thought he was at the right age, and it was a great challenge. And he looked at that course record time, and he thought it was something he was capable of beating. And so I was just fascinated. I watched him train for 6 weeks, and and at first I didn't have any intentions at all of doing it, and then it piqued my curiosity. So I started reading the entry form that was laying on the kitchen table and the information packet. And I got interested in it. And I saw that there was really no minimum age back then. You could be, I don't know, I think there was even 10-year-olds who had done the event, as long as you had a parental consent. And there was incentive that, at that point, less than, it was like 25 or 27% of the field would finish. The vast majority wouldn't. But there was rewards. There was an award that if you made it to the Appalachian Trail section, that you got a frameable certificate. And if you happened to make it to the 35-mile aid station, which is actually precisely 34.4, that you got a medal, this beautiful medal with John F. Kennedy's bust on it. And if you were to be one of those roughly 1 in 4 people that completed the entire 50.2 miles, you got a beautiful trophy. And they had a big, elaborate awards ceremony a few months after the race where they presented these awards. I learned a lot about myself that day as a 12-year-old. I knew I was a pretty good basketball player. I was a pretty good football player. I was a terrible baseball player, but was good enough to make the team. But I found out that I had this, I don't know if I was really fast or, if I had great endurance or whatever, but I had this perseverance that I learned about that day that I could tolerate a lot of discomfort for a long period of time. So 14 hours, 19 minutes, and 23 seconds of being out there. And I finished. And 2 months later, Buzz Sawyer presented me my trophy. And actually, my dad put the trophy. I had some brothers who were very outstanding athletes. One was.
Do you still have it?
I still have it. Not on display.
Did your brother get a trophy?
It's not on display, but I still have possession of it. But my older siblings were very outstanding athletes. I was telling you about my brother Bill, who won numerous medals and conference titles for Catawba College. And I had a brother who was the quarterback of the state championship football team. And I had another brother who was MVP basketball player. And I said I was okay, but I'd never won a trophy. But my father had all the state championship trophies and all the MVP trophies on our mantle in our living room there in Frederick, Maryland. And when I got my trophy for finishing 129th place in the JFK 50 mile, a 9th annual, he cleared all the other trophies out of the way and he put that one front and center. And it was just such great pride that I had. And my father thought it was pretty cool too, because he was a Division I football player and basketball player who hated running. Running was punishment. So when I would go out the door and down the road to the local state park and then turn around and run back, he was fascinated by that I could make myself do that. And that, I didn't need a coach to yell at me to go run. I could just go out the door and do it. It was, I kind of had this little thing that I could make myself do what other kids my age thought was horrible. And to me, not that it was the runner's high, that every run was great, but I did get this great sense of accomplishment every time I would say, okay, let's go out the door. We're running down to Gamble State Park. We're turning around, we're running back. And then we're going to stretch out a little bit and do my sit-ups and push-ups, my little routine that I started 54 years ago that I basically still do to today. And that's how it got started.
Wow. Now you had a diverse, I think, high school. Did you run in college? I can't remember. I did. Right. And I thought you did steeplechase. Is that right?
Yes, I did. And it's interesting. Now, I switched. I was a pretty good football player. My dad was a Division I football player. And I always looked up to him. And I had this wonderful relationship with my father, who passed away 40 years ago when I was 26 years old. But he got to see me win the JFK. So he lived long to see that. But I wanted to be a football player. And I was pretty good. And in the 10th grade, I thought that was going to be my ticket to a college scholarship, was playing football. And I got benched in the middle of the season. The coach benched me. And very respectfully, I asked the coach why. And he says, I think that so-and-so is better equipped at the cornerback, which is the defensive back position, than you are. And I was heartbroken, but I was also angry. And I got talking to the guys on the cross-country team, and I told them the situation. And they told me how the coach doesn't decide who's the starters in cross-country. We do. The stopwatch decides. So I was intrigued by that. You know, I had done the JFK a few times. It was really, that was just one of my activities, you know. And but I said, you know, maybe this is for me. So I made that decision between my sophomore year and my junior year to go into running. And I didn't have great success at first. As I tell people when I do coaching clinics, my first 2-mile time trial was 15:01.4. And not exactly going to get college coaches writing letters, recruiting you. But a year and a half later, I was down to 10:11 for 2 miles. And the local junior college allowed me to walk on, and I got better. And the steeplechase I got introduced to because I was on a nationally ranked junior college team, Hagerstown Junior College. Rick Erdman, the legendary Rick Erdman, was coaching there before he had a Hall of Fame career at Eastern Kentucky. And I'm going to a meet at Towson University. And we've got some really good guys in the 1,500 and the 5,000 and 10,000. And there wasn't a position for me. I was 10th man on the cross country team my freshman year that fall. So I saw the steeplechase and I said, can I run the steeple? He said, sure, there's a spot in the steeple. So that's how I was introduced to it. And I was actually had some pretty good aptitude at it, you know, which was shocking to my family. My mother called me Twinkle Toes because I trip over stuff that wasn't there. I didn't really seem like I'd be steeplechase material. But by the time I was a senior, I'd run 9:28.8. I was the school record holder, and I really enjoyed the steeplechase. I enjoyed that kind of like obstacle course type of thing to it. And it was only 9 minutes of racing where I was used to doing the 5,000 or 10,000, which was 15 minutes or 32 minutes of, you know, busting your butt out there and making a lot of left-hand turns. So I've run a steeple since 1981, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I really, really enjoy coaching the steeplechase. Matter of fact, most of the guys that I coach at the college level, I try to get them, just try it one time. We'll find out if it's your cup of tea or not. But I was just really, really blessed how things fell into place. How sometimes it's luck. And my dad was a very successful businessman. He used to say, you make your own luck in this world. But I look back at my life at this age, at 67, I look back at some of the things that just happenstance fell into place. That Buzz Sawyer, this legendary All-American from North Carolina State, happened to move to Hagerstown, happened to start this athletic club called the Cumberland Valley Athletic Club, 1960, happened to start this race called the JFK 50 mile, which there was hundreds of, very similar to his in 1963. It was not a unique event. Yep. And that he would work with a guy named Greg Shank, and he would sit at lunchtime and talk running. And that guy, Greg Shank, ended up being my post-collegiate coach, who I don't think I would have won the JFK 50 mile without. I believe it was his guidance, his motivation, his nuts and bolts, when to go hard, when to go easy, that got me to the winner's circle. I think on my talent alone and my hard training, my work ethic, I could have made top 10, maybe top 3, but I don't think I would have won without Greg Shank. And Greg Shank learned the event from sitting, talking with Buzz Sawyer at lunchtime, the race director of the JFK, the guy who had won the JFK. And Buzz mentored Greg, and Greg finished third. And then when I told him my secret, my senior year in college, before I went off my last semester, Christmas time, he's coaching a local runner named Terry Baker, who was a 2:28 marathon runner who went from 2:28 to 2:22. And then a year later runs 2:16. And then a year after that, he finishes in the top 10 of the Boston Marathon. And Greg Shank coached this guy, this unbelievable coach who studied and then listened to Buzz Sawyer. And he's only coaching a handful of guys, and I wanted him to coach me. And I went for a run with him at Christmas break, 1980, turning 81. And he basically asked me, what were your goals? And I knew he had been the top area guy in the JFK. And I told him what I wanted to do. And I said, and I hadn't told anybody besides my dad at that point that I wanted to win. I kind of kept it in my back pocket. It was really kind of stupid to say when you're finishing so far behind. But he listened to him and he says, that's a good goal. And then he started laying things out. And within 5 months, I'd graduated college, and he was laying out training for me day by day. And his philosophy was, if you can't break 2:30 in a marathon, that you can't think about winning the JFK, because it's probably going to take a time around 6 hours. And if you can't run 6 hours, you can't run 2.5 hours. So that became, okay, that was a stepping stone. Now I got to break 2:30 in a marathon first. And I'd run pretty close to that. I'd run 2:34.50 in college. In the conference I was in had a marathon. And I'd run 2:34.50 and got finished third place. So I thought, okay, we'll get under 2:30. So I did. And then 8 months later, not even that, 7 months later in the JFK, we laid out this plan. I think there were only 2 people in the world that thought I was going to win that day.
You and Greg.
Yeah, me and Greg. Bill Lauder from New Jersey was an absolute stud. I mean, if you looked at him, you like, man, is he from our species? And in 81, I'd raced him. I'd run really, really well. My first ultra after college, I ran a 36-mile race down in Northern Virginia. I ran 3 hours, 50 minutes, in 20 seconds. A pretty good time, for 36 miles. And Lauder killed me. He was, I want to say, he beat me by 6 minutes or something. He beat me by, literally a mile. And, a year later, I'm on the starting line with him in the JFK. And Greg was, adamant. You do this, 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 and this. You got a shot. You got a shot if you can hold back. And so I lined up next to Lauder at the starting line. And I'd had this dream. And I had this a lightweight training shoe that Adidas made called the Oregon, which it wasn't a super shoe, but I thought it gave you a nice little energy return. And I used it in training. And I was going to decide, me and Greg decided that was the shoe I was going to use in the race. And we didn't change shoes back then. You use shoes you use at the start. So I had a dream the night before the race, vivid dream, that the winner of the race is being interviewed. And the camera pans down to his shoes. And it was Adidas Oregons. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. So I line up there. Greg walks me down. He's giving me my last instructions, my last little pep talk. And I look over at Bill Lauder's shoes. And what's he wearing? Adidas Oregons. So I just try to block that out. But Greg, I always had this tendency to want to go out too fast. And the last thing Greg said to me, I'll never forget it, because I say it to everyone that I counsel in the JFK, everybody that I advise, everybody that I coach in the JFK, I say the same words that Greg told me 10 seconds before Buzz climbed up on top of his Rambler and shot that starter's pistol. He said the race doesn't start till the Shepherdstown Bridge, which is 30.5 miles, 19.7 miles ago.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden the nerves and everything went away. I thought, well, I'm just going to warm up the 30 and a half miles. And he just told me, whatever Bill Lauder does, you do. He had studied Bill Lauder, had immense respect for him. I was 24, Bill was 35. And I just tucked in behind Bill. And everything Bill did, I did. And there was a cluster of guys, I think there was 6 of us in the lead pack at about 5, going up the steep hill, the paved hill between 4 and 6 miles. And everybody, I was just quiet. I was trying to be invisible. Greg was, just be quiet, be respectful. Don't, just sit there, sit. And the guys were chatting about what they had done recently. And, Bill, gosh, his resume was stellar. He had won the JFK in 79, had been a very close. He was the top returner from 81. And he said what he had done. And then one guy throws out a 100-mile time that was 14 and change. And then I was being quiet. And they said, how about you? And I don't know if they said, hey, kid, how about you? What have you done lately? And I said, I did 14:19. And they went, for what 100 miler? Because they didn't know who I was. I said, oh, no, that's for 3 miles. And they kind of jumped. I threw a 3-mile time at them. Okay, 14:19.6. I was very proud about that. And Greg had installed in me that 50 miles was a fueling event. And that generally the guy who's fastest at 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile can win the JFK if they learn how to ration their effort for hours instead of minutes. So me and Bill Lauder went across the mountains. And as anybody knows, you carbohydrate pretty thoroughly, and you don't warm up much. Normally you warm up so you have a good bowel movement, or take care of business, so to speak, before the race. Well, I did. I had to go, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm gonna lose the Bill. I'm gonna lose 45 seconds or a minute, and I'm gonna lose contact with him. He has the same situation. He's got to go to the bathroom too. He stops in a clump of bushes. I stop in a clump of bushes maybe 10 feet away from him. He looks over at me because he knows what I'm doing. I'm shadowing him. I never took one step in front of him. I just shadowed him. So he's thinking, oh my gosh, I got a nature call.
Who's this kid?
And this kid's going to take a dump the same time. And we laughed about that after the race is over. But I followed him all the way down. And Greg said at 22 miles, then you can kind of assess how you're doing. And he was looking at me, and I'm chomping at the bit. I'm feeling great. So finally he kind of winked, and I went, and I took the lead. And Bill thought I was going way too soon, which really, with my resume and with his, record against me, he shouldn't have been concerned. The kid's taking off too soon. He's going to blow over 35 miles. I'll catch him. And I didn't. And, Greg had this plan. He said, we want to have a buffer. We want to have 6-7 minutes when you get off onto the road. So in case you cramp, you got a mile to play with. Somebody's got to make up a mile line. And when I got off, I can remember the split. It was 4 hours and 57 minutes. And the next guy back was Paul Jost, who was very similar to me. Paul was maybe 2 or 3 years older than me, but he was a 14:30, 5,000 meter runner. And he was, had good speed stepping up. And so the good news was, hey, you got your 7 minutes. The bad news, it's Paul Jost that's chasing you down. And then Bill's right behind him. But I got these updates all along the way. I was never thinking course record. I was just thinking win. Just hold on, hang on. And I never felt confident even with 2 miles to go. I said, if I cramp, that 7-minute lead I got is going to disappear.
Yep.
Walk 15 minutes a mile, guy runs 7 minutes a mile, he's going to catch it. But when I got with 1 mile to go, and then you took a right-hand turn with a half mile to go, I feel confident that even if I cramp, I'm going to cross the finish line first. But Bill, I ran the road in 56 minutes. Max White, my hero, who had held the course record before me, he ran, I believe, the same split as I did. So I closed in 56 minutes. Paul Jost closed in 55. He was coming at me. It was the first 2 times 2 guys got under 6 hours. So it was no easy thing, because people, I say, oh, were you chasing the record the whole way? I said, I wasn't even thinking about the record. Yeah. I was thinking about winning. And it was one of those situations where Paul pushed me, Bill pushed him, and the three of us were talking afterwards, like, and Bill ran his best time ever on the course, 6:03 and change, and got third. It was like, he wasn't mad. It was just like the future was now. 2 guys in their 20s, 124, 127, to beat the 35-year-old, and you kind of seen the writing on the wall. But it was one of those dream come true type days. And me and my dad, I told him when I was 12 years old, I limped to church the day after finishing in 14 hours and 19 minutes, and that I was going to win that race. We didn't talk a whole lot about it, but he was smart enough to know that I got to be pretty good in high school, a little better in junior college, a lot better, NCAA Division III, and was, running some pretty decent times. So it wasn't too much a surprise, but I did that morning. I knocked on his door and I just said, be at the finish line. Today's the day. And he knew what I was talking about. And luckily, the local news, NBC affiliate, caught it all on video. We still have it. It's on YouTube now. My father, 70 years old, bawling his eyes out. It was just a real special day, real special moment. But I had no intentions ever doing it again. That is off my back, okay? Off my back. But Greg Shank was like, no. He says, if you were healthy enough, you defend your title. That's what the champion does. You give the guys that you beat a chance to come back and beat you, because that's what you best. Yeah. That's. And I said, you got to be kidding, because I wanted to go to Chicago in '83 and try to qualify for the Olympic trials, And instead, no, okay, Greg. And Greg was more than a coach. He was more than a best friend. He was more than a father figure. He was so many things. Matter of fact, all the guys who were coached by him, Greg passed away in 2018. And Greg, we have this little thing. What would Jesus do? What would Greg do? He's the perfect coach, the perfect guy, the perfect father, the perfect husband, everything, How would Greg handle that situation? And when he said, you defend. But that was it. Jim Pellin, who had the fastest 50-mile time in the country in 1983, he comes in to break my record and to whoop my butt. He was a great guy. And but male egos are, and elite athletes. We didn't do a whole lot of talking in the race. We were trying to beat each other's brains out. We were hugging at the finish line, but during the race, we were trying to beat each other's brains out. But I somehow, some way, I pulled it off and won again. But I said, "That's it, Greg. I'm done." And Phil Jackman, who was a writer for the Baltimore Sun, he was there to cover the race, and he had done the race. He knew the JFK. He loved endurance athletics. So I'm sitting there, and I'm getting an IV because I was really dehydrated. It was a very unusually hot day. And I told him, my dad was there, and I told my dad, I said, you will not see me suffer like that last time. I said, I'm going to the coaching. I'm going to do some different things, maybe go back around the steeple again, but I'm done with this, suffering for 6 hours deal. And I told Phil Jackman that I'm done. You've seen Mike Spinnler run the 50 miles for the last time. I got some other things I want to do, And Greg was okay with that. You defended your title. But I had, I've talked about it before, but my wife does not get nearly the credit that she deserves. I'm going to brag about her for a second. We met through coaching at Eastern Kentucky University. She had run for Eastern Kentucky, was a national qualifier, school record holder, Ohio Valley Conference champion a number of times, and she was an elite athlete and much better than I ever was. And when we became romantically involved and then got married, she knew about my connection with the JFK. She wasn't really all that impressed, to be quite honest with you. And rightfully so, she qualified the Olympic trials in the 10,000 meters. And made the U.S. national team and signed the shoe company contract that she was under contract for 10 years after college. They flew her all over the world. But when I started directing, we made this conscious decision to take it over because Buzz had a health scare. Buzz thought he had prostate cancer in 1987. And I'm in the hospital room with a bunch of people visiting, and he cleared everybody out afterwards. And, very real life moment. He didn't think he was going to make it. And he says, are you ready? And we talked a little bit about it, going back 4 years earlier, our conversation. Are you ready to take over if necessary? And I said, yes. I said, put your mind at ease. This race will outlive you. And luckily, Buzz, it was, he beat the prostrate situation. He lived another couple of decades. And then, but when he was old, when he got tired at 64, 65 years of age, after doing it for 30 years, and I'm talking the heavy lifting, all this stuff, whether in all the changeover in administration and the governing bodies you had to go through to get permits, the National Park Service and local and state highway administration, he weathered all that stuff. And it's very, very, it can wear you down. Being a race director, sometimes it can be tough. But he did it for 30 years. 30 years, nothing stopped him.
And now you've got, I think, the most number of years as the second race director, but you've now surpassed that. It's how many years now? 20 years?
This is my 33rd year of directing the race.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, there's certain people in your life that just inspire you. My father was one of those people. My mother, I wanted to please them. I didn't want to be that problem child. I wanted to be that kid that they were talking about at Boy Scouts. They were talking about at the local youth basketball league. Hey, that kid's a great sportsman. And Buzz was one of those people. I wanted Buzz to be proud of me. It was such an honor that he chose me. And it was, most of the people who won the race were from outside the state. They were elite athletes that came in from, and I lived literally, blocks away from him. When he gave me the race, I lived less than a mile from where Buzz lives, and he was picking me. And I was like, this incredible honor, this great responsibility, and nervous. Can I live up to his expectations?
Yeah, it's a big responsibility.
Yeah. When I looked at that, that's a pretty huge chunk of time, 30 years. And I didn't look at it like that. I looked at it like a guy looks at the 10,000 meters. You don't race the 17th lap. You race the first lap and the second lap. And that's how we did. But I got to tell you, by 8 or 9 years, I was thinking, a decade. Buzz did it then, but a decade's probably good. And then you hand it off, doing it in a decade. And then, but my wife, who was, our skill sets complement each other so well, is I'm an idea guy. I want to win the JFK, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. And then she's more of the nuts and bolts of going down and saying, well, how are we going to do that? How is this going to be possible? How are we going to manage this? Because we literally risked bankruptcy when we took the event over. Buzz was a wonderful, wonderful man, and never got married and never had kids. And he would, when the race would finish in the red every year, he would write the checks to bring it up into the black. And I didn't know that nobody knew that he was doing that. And it was a wonderful, noble thing to do. But me and Maria were in our 30s and we just bought our first house. We just got married, wanted to have kids and stuff. It was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah. You almost didn't know what you were fully signing up for when you took on the responsibility to say, I'll take it on. Don't worry, this will outlive you. But there was a bit more underneath the covers.
You know what? There's always that Disney movie, and then there's the behind the scenes stuff it's hard.
Yeah.
But luckily, I had this amazing woman with this amazing skill set, and we worked it out. And but the first year, I tried to do pretty much everything on my own. And I just had this stupid philosophy. If I want it done right, I do it myself. And then I learned pretty soon that like a very good, successful NFL coach, you can't be the only coach. You have to hire a defensive coordinator, an offensive coordinator, a special teams guy. And then if they give you National Coach of the Year, you deserve it because you made wise decisions. You hired talented people to fill in. And I did that over time. I looked around and I had a kid out of Clear Spring High School named Tim Mason. And he'd won a national junior college title. It beat a bunch of East African athletes that he had no business beating because he believed in my philosophy and my coaching. And then Tim, as time went on, he came back and started helping me out. And little did I know, he had great skills. He was a computer science major. And he was the type of guy who could jump in, get his hands greasy and fix something, but also get on the computer and use his brain as well. And then Andy Mason, who knew nothing about the JFK. He was a journalist. And he was told to go cover the JFK, fell absolutely in love with the event, did the event, then became an elite athlete and got in the top 10 twice. He's banging it out with Scott Jurek back in 2009, 2010, back when Scott Jurek was still running fast, a local guy. And then when Andy kind of slowed down, he got involved with race administration, maintains our website, elite athlete coordinator. He does so many things outside of that, but this great guy who had this sense of involvement with me, like athlete coach, that branched out. People say, "Oh, you're being modest." And I said, "No, I'm gonna take credit for identifying the talent of these people and then bringing them on board. But it saddens me so much that the local races that me and my wife won decades ago, they're gone and basically died with the race directors. And Buzz did not want that to happen. He did not want the race to die with him. And I feel good about that. I overheard Buzz one time, and it brought me to tears. And he was talking to somebody on JFK weekend after he had passed it on to me. And he didn't know where I was, but I heard him say the smartest thing I ever did was turn the race over to Mike Spinnler. And I teared up. I still tear. I says, that was the approval I wanted. There can be people out there that don't like the way I do things, some of the changes I made with the race. But when he said that, it was like it justified my existence. I not to be religious or anything like that, but I had a purpose, and Buzz found me. He identified me, and I fulfilled what he wanted me to do. I do a lot of cycling. I still commute. Today I rode over to the college, coached my guys, rode back home, and I always think to myself, cyclists get hit by cars sometimes, and I always tell my wife, last thing we always say to each other, I love you, and mean it, because we just never know. Nobody ever planned, hey, today I'm going to get hit by a car. I try to be really, really careful, wear my helmet, flashing lights in the front, flashing lights behind, but I feel really good knowing if something happens to me, that race is going to take place on November 22nd. And it's going to take place next year, 2026, on November 21st. That it's going to go on. It's going to continue. And we've got guys. One of the high school athletes that I was mentoring just turned 30 years of age. He did the race when he was 16 years old. And he did it with another former athlete that I coached who was in her late 30s, and she mentored him through the race. Mitchell Swope is this young man's name. And Mitchell would not let this race die. He would not let it happen. So we've got this nice lineage. And I keep telling everybody else, I said, don't wait too long. I said, when I'm gone, don't wait. Buzz didn't wait. Buzz was talking to me when I was 25. And then at 35 is when it happened. I said, don't think it's going to happen in 3 months. Find somebody who's going to bring great.
Have you picked a deputy yet? And do you know who the reins are being handed off to?
You know what? I never thought it was going to be 30 years. Okay. When I made it through 10 and then 20, and really at the 2012, which was unbelievable, Teddy Roosevelt IV, the great grandson of our president, Teddy Roosevelt, shot the gun to start the race. John F. Kennedy's great nephew looking, and when he walked in a room, every guy in the place said, that's a Kennedy. Every girl in the place's jaw dropped. Okay. That's a Kennedy. That was the 2012 50th JFK. Kennedy's involved, the Roosevelt family involved. And I thought that might be it. I thought that's it. 20 is a nice round number. 30 is impossible. And then 21, 22. And then 30 came up, and I really was like, I said to Maria, I'm feeling pretty good. I got this great staff, and I've really delegated a number of tasks to really, really talented people. So I don't know. Like the college, I talked with the athletic director recently. I thought I was going to retire at 55. And then 55 came, and 60 came, and 65 came. And now I'm going, I'll turn 70 in cross-country season 2028. I feel pretty good, and I'm going to give you that. But I also say, I've also seen this through my life, that you'll see somebody who's really fit, doing really good, and then all of a sudden they're not. So, we have things in place. But I got to tell you, both my sons, one turns 27 this week, September 7th, he'll be 27, and he's finished the race. And then I have another son who's serving in the Air Force, who will be 29 in December. He's done the race. And they loved the event. They hated it. They absolutely hated the event because it's crazy in our house in the months leading up to the JFK. It is no fun to be a teenager living in the house of the race director of the JFK. Okay? They hated the event. But then once they did the event, it was like the scene in Field of Dreams. Ray, you're crazy. You're going to lose your farm. And then all of a sudden he sees the guys playing the game. And he says, Ray, you can't sell this farm. All of a sudden he saw the magic. And my sons, once they did the JFK, neither of them runners. One was a lacrosse player. The other one was very involved in the theater and the arts guy. But when they did the JFK, it was all of a sudden like that scene in Field of Dreams. Dad, you can't sell this farm. And I don't know if they'll do it. But they've learned more.
So they're front runners.
They've learned more and more about the event. But Tim Mason and Andy Mason, no relationship, two of my former athletes, they're magnificent. And I don't know if it'll change. I don't know if it'll be by committee. I don't know if someone's actually going to carry the name race director. I don't know. I know right now The old saying is not broke, don't fix it. And they still feel good and the energy's there. And I even tell them, I want you to have the guts to come up to me and help me. If you think that I am starting to slip, and I was watching the football game last night, and Bill Belichick might be slipping a little bit, okay? maybe I need to tell Bill that maybe it's time to go back to the commentating booth or do podcasts like me. I want them to tell me. I want to know, and Buzz Sawyer, and one of the great lessons in life that I learned when he stopped doing the event at age 64 was the last time he directed. At 65, he was back on the starting line, and he did the event for a number of years. But there was a point in there where Buzz, I didn't get your entry form. I'm not going to do it this year. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? He hurt? No, everything was fine. He says, I just want to get out before I do something that hurts the race, that he breaks a hip up on the Appalachian Trail, or he has a heart episode or something. His concern for the race overshadowed his concern for him trying to be the first 82-year-old to finish or something like that. I was like, wow, that unselfishness, and that the main thing is this. And so,
well, one of the things I've appreciated about your things that I've read about your public comments, and even in the lead up to my own running of the race, is that you are very complimentary of the staff and all of the people that go into making it. And maybe that's a little bit of a segue into like what it really takes to make this race go on. You've talked a bit about delegation and working with many people. Obviously there's the people in your life that are supporting you. But most races, as you said, they don't survive 60 years without somebody being a good steward. And so what have you found as being the sort of right mix? You almost talked about a committee. What are the things that you think have helped it outlast some of these other races that were great, but just may have been too hung up on the race director or that one personality that kept it going?
I can tell you the first 30 years is just remarkable, and someone should make a movie of his life. But Buzz Sawyer carried it on his back and literally financially supported the event and kept it alive through him picking up the losses on the event every year. So the first 30 years, that was one person. Now there was other people that carried clipboards and helped him to stuff like that, but he could have very easily folded that up like every other. And I'm not condemning. There was hundreds of these JFK challenges around the United States, and Buzz Sawyer's was the only one that saw a decade, and then 2, and then 3. And but since I've taken over, learned a lot of stuff from my dad, learned a lot of stuff from my wife, who was like, okay, that sounds good, but how are we going to do it? How are we going to lay this out? What is the plan? How are we going to fund this? Okay, we're going to find sponsorship. How are we going to recruit sponsorship? How are we going to retain sponsorship? All those things that are going to make this happen, But
it's not too dissimilar from Molly and I. We just, we've got this new retail shop here, and we were thinking, we really need to, cover. We've got this wall that's kind of partially in the middle of the space, and it divides our production space and our retail space. And we said, we can kind of see these bins. It doesn't look very nice. Is there a way that we can somehow sort of obscure them? And, Molly got to work and figured out this whole solution. So yeah, the way you're describing your partnership with your wife is pretty similar to how Molly and I operate with Bakline and my brother, Rob. It's a family operation. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And it is, and you got to give and take. And I look at that in the world of sports. Jackie Joyner-Kersee, who I think was the greatest female athlete who ever lived, and Bobby Kersee was her coach and her husband, and how they made that work. And here they are many decades later, and she's retired. They're still married. Bobby's still coaching people. I just saw her out at the World Championship trials in Eugene, Oregon at the end of July and the 1st of August. And this is a wonderful human being. And I look at stuff like that because there's going to be days. There's going to be days where Mike Spinnler isn't the nicest guy in the world to be living with. Okay. and my wife is going to weather that storm, and she does. And I'm so appreciative of her. But the thing is, we look at it like an athlete is like the LA trials or the LA games are 2028. Well, we're going to prepare now. We're going to start preparing 36 months out, not 3 months out, not a year out. And we do the same thing with the JFK. Buzz, it was a dream of Buzz's. He used to talk about it with me in private, about the 50th 50. The race locally kind of had been nicknamed the 50. the locals who do the event were calling it the 50. It wasn't the JFK. It was the 50. And it was Buzz was like, the 50th 50. Is that going to happen? And when it did, and Buzz was already having some memory issues at that point, but he was having a good day. And I think the good Lord was looking down to give him a couple of good days where he remembered and he cried and he did it. But then we started, the mantra was immediately the 100th JFK, November of 2062. Okay. And I look around, I go, guys, chances are the actuary table is at 104 that I'm not going to be at that rate. I'm not going to have too much what's going on. But Mitchell, you're going to be in your 60s. My sons, Willie and Jimmy, you guys are going to be in your 60s. I'm in my 60s now, and I'm still riding my bicycle 10,000 miles a year and still working out every night and pretty vibrant. And I says, you guys are going to be part of this. And if everything goes well, you're going to be the one that make it happen in November. And we sit down with that. And it's how we've overcome. Every time somebody says you can't do it, it's not happening. The blizzard that we had in 1987 that Buzz goes, I have to cancel the event. No, Buzz figured out a way. And COVID, we sat down with the governor's office. Larry Hogan told us what we had to do. He didn't say we couldn't, but here's what you have to do. And it wasn't easy. It was a really detailed, and we said, okay, we're going to do it. Step by step, step by step. And we got crucified, but there was a lot of people that thought we should have canceled that year. And we were like, would Buzz have canceled? And it was like, no, Buzz wouldn't have canceled. Buzz would have found a way. We're going to try to find a way. Now, when Larry Hogan said it was okay, but here's the rules you got to go by. So we found our way through that stuff. And even we look at it and government shutdowns. They shut the government down and they say you can't use the national parks. We're in trouble because we use the Appalachian Trail and we use the Canal National Historical Park towpath. So, we have to have a plan in place. Do we cancel or do we use an alternate route? We've had plans in that. We did. If there's a fire, forest fire, if there's a raging forest fire, we're not putting people on the Appalachian Trail and have them risk their lives. Or if that one of those 100-year floods hits and the towpath is underwater and nobody in there is going to go in there, water up to their waist and go up the towpath, what are we going to do? Do we have alternate routes? Do we have other ways to do it? Can we find a solution? And we've done all this. We've planned it all out. And I'm not saying, and one of the biggest worries we ever had was 2002. I don't know if you guys are kind of young, but 2002, the Beltway Sniper was still on the loose. In the DC metropolitan area, the Beltway Sniper, this was international news, was still going around and shooting people, and races were being canceled. And, we didn't know what we were going to do. We weren't sure. That was probably the closest we ever came to cancel. I was like, and when they caught him, he was at the Washington County, Frederick County line. He was literally miles from the JFK course, not race weekend, but they caught him in November of 2002. So, stuff you don't even think about, that we're going to weather the storm, and think outside the box. What are we going to do? The government shutdown that nobody plans for. What are we going to do? So not that we're foolproof, but we're pretty resilient.
I'm starting to wonder if my screen is being shared because you're answering every question before we're able to ask it. So
I did read your outline. I'm glad you gave me.
You did, but we had more questions that we embargoed, to help with the conversation. But we appreciate it because you're making our job very easy.
Okay, it's I was coaching 1987, and people started showing up. And I heard they were calling me Little Buzz. One of the guys had run for Buzz Sawyer in the 60s, and they were calling me Little Buzz. And they didn't know how I would take that. But I was like, oh, my gosh, could there be a greater compliment, to be a coach and Buzz was this incredible coach. And before that, he was NCAA Division I All-American from North Carolina State. He wore USA on his chest. He represented our country. He was, had a real good chance of making the 1960 Olympic team as a 10,000 meter runner, but he slipped and fell on the ice and broke his leg that winter of 59 turning 60. And so whenever a comparison comes up that I get mentioned with Buzz Sawyer, it's like being a quarterback and having somebody mention your name with Joe Montana. But it's how would Buzz handle that situation? How would he deal with it? And he networked, and he'd had some politicians who had done the race, some senators and some congressmen that had helped him through tough times in the permitting process and utilizing your personnel. But ultimately, if things succeed, they're going to pat you in the back and they're going to say, I was telling one of the kids today, says, Coach, what's going on tonight? I said, I'm doing another podcast where they're probably going to call me a legend. And I said, I know I'm not a legend, just got good people around me, and I was helped by these people.
You were on our, when Molly and I sat down and we really wanted to have these types of conversations, and I listed out some of the initial, 10, 15 conversations that we wanted. This was one of those top 10 conversations. As somebody who's ran it, who's heard you speak about it before, you speak very passionately, not only about the course, but about coaching and the people around you. And Molly crewed me this year, and one of our athletes. Again, we have a couple of athletes that we're coaching that are running this year as well. So it's one that matters, to us as well. And so for the listeners, though, we did have all these questions about, all of the things that happened behind the scenes, but we appreciate you've answered these.
I was curious, kind of as we started to talk about the community aspect and the group of people that you fostered. I know, from Matt running it and just me knowing the history of the race, how vibrant all the aid stations are and how much that's just become part of the fabric of the race, and how, as a race director, since you were the one that introduced a lot of the more frequent aid stations, how did you manage to foster that?
It's interesting because I have a friend of mine who was a world-class athlete. He's now a very prominent politician, and he likes all his constituents to be happy with his decisions. But you're never going to make everyone happy. There's always going to be someone. So when I took over with the JFK, I was a former elite athlete. And much like boxing, you were dependent on your guy in your corner, your cut man, so to speak. You were dependent on him to be able to help you, him or her, like you did for Matt, to help him through the race. The handler was very, very important. You couldn't win the JFK unless you had a really good cut man, cut woman,
world class
handler. Still to this day, it is a big, big assistance to have somebody out there to say the right things, to give you the right things, your special nutrition, just the right word. Like Greg Shank said to me, the race doesn't start to the Shepherdstown Bridge. But I will tell you, when I took over, one of the first things I wanted to do, because when Jim Pellin and me had this titanic battle in 1983, I had the greatest handler in the race. Of all the people in the starting line, my handler was the best. He was Greg Shank. He was the best. He knew all the right things to do, where to sit, how to do my cups. He was so meticulous that he took cups from fast food restaurants, kept them, the plastic lid and the straw. He put my drinks in there. My watered down Gatorade, 2 parts Gatorade, 1 part water, was inside cups like that. Well, I didn't worry about spilling it. I grabbed it and drank it out of the straw. He was meticulous down to that point. But Bill didn't have that. And really, I had an unfair advantage, to be quite honest. And to this day, it still bothers me a little bit that he didn't have the same type of handler I did. And so when I took over as director, I wanted an even playing field. I wanted the guy coming from California to have the same advantages of the person who lived on the race course. That when you went through those aid stations, if you needed an electrolyte drink, or you needed sugar, or you needed salt, or whatever you needed, it was going to be there, whether you had a handler or not. Now, you're better off with the handler, Matt, as you know, but that's what I want to do. And I had people get angry at me. He said, you destroyed the flavor of the event. The event has always been this team between the handler and the runner. And I apologized to him. I said, I understand where you're coming from. And Buzz even said to me, when I hand this over to you, I know our philosophies are different. I had come through an age where if I did well in a race, the race director would hand me an envelope, and in that envelope was cash. Buzz came from an era where if you did that, you would be banned. And Buzz didn't do it. Buzz didn't even take free shoes. I took the envelope when they offered it because I was broke and trying to make my rent. And if the shoe company was giving me free shoes, I was taking them, I was wearing them, and I was telling the world they were the greatest shoes ever made. He and Buzz had different philosophies. I'm okay with that. And so I just had to let these people know. I appreciate your input and I respect your opinion, but this is what we're doing. And I told them why we were doing it. And one of the magical things about the JFK is, yes, it's a foot race, but it's also a way of honoring John F. Kennedy and his dreams and his goals and what he hoped a healthier, more vibrant country. And John F. Kennedy, when I studied him, he considered one of his most valuable skills was his ability to negotiate and to give and take for the better of the whole thing. And I've had to do the same thing over the years. I've had to, when I say I'm talking for the whole race management team. We've had to make, concessions. We've had to, but the race saw the 53rd annual, saw the 54th.
What are some of the other, sounds like introduction of aid stations was one. What were some? I know headphones comes up, and
yes, and that was a buzz.
I know drop bags has come up before for you. What are some of the? Are those the main ones, or are there even other ones that aren't percolating up into circles?
Well, and we're old school in a lot of ways, and even like even the chip timing thing. We're going to have 1,200 starters, but the gun starts. The time starts for everybody on the gun, not when you cross the time in. So if you get caught in your car or you're putting Vaseline someplace or whatever, so we're old school with that, and we've had some debate with our group about that, and and it's not a unanimous decision, but we decided to stay with that old tradition. That's gun, bang. When I shoot the pistol, which is Buzz's job, that's when everybody's time starts. And then with the time cutoffs. And, when Buzz first did the event, it was 20 hours. Teddy Roosevelt allowed 20 hours. And when Kennedy started the challenge, it was 20 hours. Then it went down to 16. Then it went down to 15. Then it went down to 14. And we had a dilemma with the Park Service, and rightfully so. I understood what their reasoning was, that they didn't want us up there in the dark. They didn't want us up on the Appalachian Trail in the dark, and they didn't want us down the towpath in the dark. So we had to figure out a way. We thought about moving to like a June or a July date with the longer daylight hours, but the heat of the thing and it didn't fit in. And Buzz is one of the reasons Buzz had the date that he had, that it was after the high school and collegiate cross country seasons were basically over. So you could get those people to do it. And people had a chance to train during the summer months and the fall months and not try to train during the winter months to get ready. So there's, some of that, the stuff we went with, and people thought, they'll come after me. And sometimes, you have a hard job, and I'll take that. It's part of the deal of being race director. Some people aren't going to be happy with the decisions you make. But we've tried to incorporate the people who aren't runners, that are from the area, who understand what this does. This brings people from around the world into Washington County for this event that honors John F. Kennedy. That is the military people take so seriously, because their history with John F. Kennedy and being military readiness to cover 50 miles on foot, which military officers were required by Teddy Roosevelt. But we've tried to do that. And then these aid stations, at first we were like, man, how are we going to find 13, 14, 15 groups to go out there and give us that many hours in freezing cold, bad weather days, and that kind of stuff. But they have fallen in love with it. And these people don't, they look forward to it. They can pay, basically, when I see them, 82 days, they can tell me how long, because it's fun. And then the high school kids who work many of these aid stations will end up doing the event. They'll come back to me 10 years later as 27-year-olds instead of 17. Mr. Spinnler, do you remember me? And I'll go, oh my gosh, she's so cool. I had one of those just recently. A guy who was a sprinter on my team, 15 years ago, who's doing Ironman triathlons now. He was running the 100 meters back then, who's going to do the JFK. It's just very rewarding, but it's a juggling act to try to keep as many people happy as you can. And, we do so much for local charities. And then, the tourism people love us because it's a down weekend. It's normally a weekend where all the hotel rooms in Washington County are empty, because the next weekend everyone's traveling because of Thanksgiving. But it's a boom weekend, that people come in and stay in the hotels and eat in the restaurants and are having a blast and hopefully having a very positive experience with Washington County. That our tourism, loves it. So, from my perspective, it's just like a win-win-win every direction you look. But
Is your laptop dying?
Sorry about that. My battery went dead, and my lovely Maria came in the room and just saved me, plugged me back in.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Totally fine.
I'm good to go.
Okay.
I do want to talk course strategy.
Okay.
But as a coach and a coach of two people running it this year, tell me more about this 3x10 mile workout you did.
Okay.
And should I be giving it to other people?
Like I said, Greg Shank, my life would be vastly different with that. Greg was a student of the sport. He learned from Buzz. He also studied all kinds of different coaches and philosophies. And the Russians getting ready for the 1980 Olympics, their top male marathoners had done this workout 3 times 20 kilometers, one at 8 a.m., one at noon, one at 4 p.m. They gradually got faster. The last 20-kilometer segment was at marathon goal pace. So Greg modified the workout for me and this fellow, Terry Baker, who ended up running 2:15, got top 10 at the Boston Marathon, was sponsored by New Balance, and he modified it. And he did it for the Boston. We were getting ready for Boston 82 is when we did it. And he spaced it 3 weeks prior, 22 days to be exact, is when we did it. 8 a.m., noon, and then 4 p.m. And Terry Baker, who was a 2:16 guy at the time, he went 56 minutes, 54 minutes, and then 50 minutes. And I went 58, 57, 56. And it was hard. The last 10 miles, you've already run 20 miles and you're running the last 10 miles at your goal marathon pace.
And just for context for listeners, right? We're talking about 3 10-mile marathon paced workouts at 8, noon, and 4 on the same day.
Yes.
So you ran 30 miles at marathon pace.
And we jogged
4 hours apart.
Yeah, and we jogged a little bit, maybe a quarter-mile warm-up and a quarter-mile warm-down after each segment.
Yeah.
And it was very.
I just wanted to provide the context for people who didn't have the background on this famous workout that you've talked about doing.
Well, I know the Russians were doing something similar, but I don't know if anybody in the U.S. was. And Greg was this trailblazing coach. He had Olympic athletes. They started calling Hagerstown the Boulder of the East. We had world-class athletes starting to move to our area to train under Greg. And me and Terry Baker were his first 2 athletes. We joke about it now, decades later, 45 years later, that we were kind of guinea pigs. And he was trying some things on us. Now, I got to tell you, by the time he was coaching Chris Fox, who finished 7th in the Olympic marathon trials and ran 2:13, it was a sub 28-minute 10,000 meter run. By the time he was coaching Chris, he was no longer doing that workout. Now, I can tell you, and we have a running audience, so they understand some of the stuff is kind of gross that people talk about. But me and Terry, the morning after doing the 3 times 10 miles, we were doing a shakeout run, and we were on a local golf course, and we head off into the bushes. And I said to Terry, Terry, I had blood in my stool. And he said, so did I. Yeah, so there's a point where a workout does a little too much.
So I think the answer is no.
Yeah.
The answer is no.
But psychologically, I've always told people this. It was like the people who think if a snake bites you, it's going to make you stronger or something, whatever. And it was almost like we thought this workout was going to make us stronger. Now, I don't have my athletes do it, but it was something that we did. We also did some fasting. We also did some stuff where Ron Hill, the great runner from Great Britain who won the 1970 Boston Marathon, he played around with carbohydrate depletion loading diets. And that we did a different version of it where we depleted, we actually fasted. We'd fast for 36 hours. And we would do it from 7 days out to basically 5.5 days before the race. That was our depletion phase. And then we stopped doing that. We stopped doing that because we thought it was much more beneficial. And then goos came along. But, as far as that workout goes, I look at that in my logbook and I can remember the first one wasn't too bad. The second one started hurting about 6 or 7 miles. The third one, you're going to the starting line going, how the hell am I going to do this? But he was a great motivator, and he'd be on his bicycle and yelling at you and calling splits and the whole deal. And, when you got it done, you thought you were ready to run through a brick wall. You just thought that you were better prepared than everybody else. And maybe it's that just old football mentality. We're tough guys, that type of thing. But, it was a very challenging workout. And I do remember I think it was Dan Brannon. Dan won the JFK in 1980. I think I remember telling him about that workout. He was just pretty fascinated by that because he's like the ultimate student of the sport. And he didn't know anybody else was doing that. But as time went on, Greg kind of modified for when he was training somebody for a 50 miler. And it was the crescendo training that would go up to 3 weeks out, that we would run a marathon. If it was a local marathon, you would do a 2-mile warm up, run the marathon, do a 2-mile warm down, 30 miles, and then come back that evening, maybe 8 hours break. Let's say you finished the marathon started at 8 a.m. and you finished at 11, finished your run. Then you'd come back at about 6 p.m. and you try to throw down a 6-mile run where you were finishing the last mile at marathon pace, at 5:30 pace. You were trying to start 6:30, and you'd done 30 miles that morning at race pace, at 50-mile pace, and then that night. And that was a workout that I think replaced the 3 times 10 miles.
Yeah.
That was the work that placed that, because you were hitting it at the end. You were going very fast at the end, and psychologically you were like, man, I'm good to go. I knew people were doing a lot longer long runs than I was doing. And he had a different philosophy. He was always like a speed-based guy. And I was blessed to have some really, really good coaches in college and at post-collegiate. But Greg was just a master of getting you to believe that you could do special things. And I mean, Terry Baker would line up against Olympic medalists, some of the best in the world, and Terry just wasn't fazed by it. He thought he was as good as those guys, and he did. He placed top 10 at Falmouth, and he placed top 10 at Boston. He won Cherry Blossom. He did some he actually broke Frank Shorter's American record for 15 miles. And Frank Shorter set that record weeks after he won the silver medal in Montreal in 76. And then Terry Baker broke that 15-mile record. And then I said, we had the same coach. And it was the reason, like I said, I've said this before, people started moving to this tiny little place, Hagerstown, Maryland, Williamsport, Maryland, to train on the towpath, to run the hills. And he wouldn't take money. He had a very successful career as an architect, and he wouldn't take a dime. Now, late in his career, I said, Greg, that bike you're riding around is kind of worn out. How about you let me buy you a new bicycle? Hey, Greg, those shoes are looking a little ratty. I'm getting sponsored by a shoe company. How about? So he would take stuff like that. And he was competing against literally some of the best coaches in the world who were, and rightfully so, receiving substantial salaries from the world-class athletes they were coaching. So.
Yeah, we just did in fact, the episode that we just released today, which is episode 5, the one that we're recording now is episode 6, but that was all about coaches, finding the right coach. And a lot of the things that you've said has actually kind of played very nicely into how the words that a coach say matter and how they motivate you matters. And it's far more than just the workouts that are on a page. And that's the bare minimum for any coach. But the things that you're talking about of what a coach can do to really motivate you, how they can help you get the best out of yourself. It sounds like you really had that relationship in Greg. I've got that in Molly. Hopefully we are that for the people that we coach, but it's great to hear you talk so passionately about coaching, because it's something that not only that we're passionate about, but it's something that we think very deeply about. And clearly that's an important element of your life and how you kind of take that into, I think, not only the running of and the race directing of the JFK 50, but you're almost approaching it more from a coaching perspective than a race directing.
I think that's part of it. And because I think I do it the same way Buzz did. Buzz was a coach. He was a coach. He was a world-class athlete. And then he was a coach. And then he was a director. And he saw the needs of his athletes. And one of the reasons he picked me and he told me is that I understood not only the needs of the elite athletes in the front, I understood the needs of the people in that last hour who started in the dark and are finishing in the dark.
That's precisely what we talked about that if a coach needs to think consciously, particularly if they're a front of the pack person like yourself, like I'm lucky to be, you need to, as a coach, really think consciously about what is everyone's experience like throughout the entire pace range. If you're going to be a good coach or a good race director or a good motivator, you can't think solely about your own experience. It's usually going to be too myopic in order to really be effective for a broader range of people that you want to impact.
These coaches, I had a guy named Dick Fisher, and Dick Fisher has coached some Olympic athletes. And I watch British commentary, and they'll be talking about Dick Fisher's athletes. And he coached me in 1980 for a short period of time. And I studied him, and he knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn his system. And then Rick Erdman, this Hall of Fame coach from Eastern Kentucky University, who introduced me to my wife, I studied him, and I coached under him. And Greg Shank, who, God, absolute genius, and Buzz Sawyer. But there's differences in all of their approaches. And I don't know if I came up with it, or if I stole it from Buzz, or I stole it from Greg. But if I did, forgive me. But there's more than one way to cook a gourmet meal. Yeah. And coaches are like cooks. They can follow the recipe. And the recipe said, I'm starting to smell that to burn, but it says to simmer for 20 minutes, and it's only 17 minutes and 30 seconds. Well, the smart coach and smart cook are going to take it off and not leave it on 20 and let it burn, to modify the workout, to modify the session.
But we know coaches that would leave it on for 20 because it says
that's what it says.
That's what the recipe says.
Yeah, that's what the recipe says. But so I've taken bits and pieces from all of them. But with the JFK, and I still coach some people in the JFK. Ian Torrance, who was second place in the 2004 JFK, was an absolute legend in the JFK, an absolute legend in the sport. Ian Torrance. He's coming back to finish his 30th JFK this year. And I'm so honored that JFK was his first ultra. And his wife, Emily won the JFK twice. She did 6 hours and 17 minutes when that was just unheard of, when that was still contending for top spots in the men's race. And they're the official coaches of the JFK. They're on our website. And people, when they ask questions, I go, hey, listen, last time I was on the starting line was 1990, and things have changed. I said, Emily and Ian are current. Pick their brains. They're the ones you want to go to for a plan, that type of thing. But there's still a few people that I'm the old wise man. I kind of like one of my favorite. I love the Rocky movies. And as time has gone on, I'm no longer Rocky. I'm Mick. I'm the old, I look in the mirror and I go, how did this happen? But it's okay because Mick was pretty cool, and Rocky listened to him and Rocky trusted him. So I've become Mick. So I still have a few athletes that I give, but it's more the rah-rah speeches. And it's more because I don't know. I never wore super shoes. We didn't change shoes, but you're a fool not to. Now when the elite athletes come off Weaverton cliffs, they sit down in chairs provided by their handlers and they change their shoes like triathletes. And you're a fool not to. It's totally legal. It's the state of the sport. And I get some of the old timers. It's not fair. It's not fair. I said, let me ask you something. Are the shoes we used in 1985, were they better than the shoes that the guys used in 1945? You're damn right they are. Okay. And are the shoes better in 2025 than what we used in 1985? They are. And will the shoes in 2065 be better than the shoes? Yes. As long as it's even legal playing field and everybody has the same options, I'm okay with it. Because people are like, oh, your record, they're beating your record, blah, 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 because no, they're smarter. And I tell you, they're tougher. I watch these guys go at it like it's a 5,000 meter race, not a 50-mile race. The way they tuck in, they draft on each other. We used to warm up across the mountains. The race didn't start to 30.5 miles. The race freaking starts now when I shoot the gun. They're going sub 6 minute pace up the mountain. They're fighting for position. They're racing the whole distance right now. So anybody on there, and I argue with the old timers, and I'm an old timer myself, and I'm going, give them the respect they deserve. It hasn't changed. The super shoes don't make the suffering go away.
Yeah.
No, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, particularly for trail and ultra. On the AT, I'm not sure how much a shoe will certainly help give you some stability, and that will certainly help. Yeah. But we're not talking about trail super shoes don't really.
That's why they changed into them. The Appalachian Trail is still old school. There's rocks up there that haven't changed much in 45 years. I've changed a lot in 45 years. They're still waiting to knock out your teeth. I coach a dentist, and I always joke with her. I says, I'm gonna have business for you. The first a couple of days after the JFK, there'll be some local runners that'll knock their teeth out in the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, I took a couple of spills on mine, and I always get nervous that I'm gonna impale myself on some rock or stick or whatever. But I was lucky. You catch yourself and everything, but yeah, you do get nervous being up there on the ridgeline and coming down. There's some steep parts, particularly when you're coming into mile 15 and a half there at the aid station. It's pretty steep downhill.
The most dangerous mile of the event is 14 and a half to 15 and a half, coming down those steps. And
for sure.
People think, I got it behind me. Okay, maybe I took a couple of falls where they weren't too bad, and they're thinking, and they take a nasty fall coming down there and broken fingers.
I totally agree.
Broken fingers are very common. But if I'm going to throw out some advice that still is from my era and still I think carries over is, and the elite athletes are on their own, David Sinclair, Rachel Brooks, the 6 hours is just, not crazy because that's what she is. She's sub 2:30 in the marathon, which these women are doing, can break 6 hours in the JFK. Somebody said, they're on drugs. I said, they're not on drugs. They've gotten under 2:30 in a marathon and they're taking that speed up to it. But the Appalachian Trail, I always tell people, and this was Greg Schenk, country boy mentality, follow Bill Lauder. If Bill Lauder puts his foot somewhere and doesn't fall, put your foot where Bill put it. If Bill puts his foot somewhere and falls, don't put your foot where Bill put his foot. And you laugh about it, but that's basically it. That Congo line they talk about that 800 to 1,000 person long Congo line. Just get close to the person in front of you, watch it, be respectful, don't be clipping their heels, but watch what they do, especially if they have more talent than you do at trail running. They don't mind, And then, like my wife did the event when she was in her 60s, and she was never a good trail person, even when she was young. But she would be around people, and if she stumbled, her hands would go onto somebody's back or something, instead of falling, she would fall into somebody. And they were all friends and they were all doing it together. So it was more like a team effort, because it's those falls you make into the rocks. It's psychological. Oh man, I didn't want to be bleeding. That wasn't part of the deal. I'm gonna have to suffer bad enough for 50 miles as it is. I don't want a broken finger or a busted tooth or a gash on my head or whatever, But I always tell people, you do that. And the reason we have the 5 hours, we allow 5 hours to go the first 15 half miles. On pace. Well, no, you're not on pace, but we do that. That's the Buzz Sawyer rule. We did that so Buzz would have enough time when he was in his 70s to take his time across the mountain and then get down the towpath and start going 10-minute pace, which he could do at that point, and make up that lost time. So that's what I tell those people to do. Get across the mountains and not be beat up, not be bleeding, not needing medical care. And then make sure you take advantage of those aid stations. Man, put the calories in, put the electrolytes in. So soak in those 15 and 16-year-old kids who are going bananas because they want you to succeed. And this is so cool what they're watching. And then
I will say that is one of the things that I really loved about every aid station. Every single person was engaged. I think it's actually more common in ultras for everybody at the aid station to be engaged, but JFK 50 seems to be at another level of everyone from, it's usually a family or an extended family, right? At many of these aid stations, and they are all like, you are their adopted child for the time that you come through that aid station.
They have 1,200 family members in the race that they want to succeed. They want them to have that moment of whether it's daylight or dark, crossing that finish line in front of Springfield Middle School and getting that beautiful medallion placed around their neck. They want them to have them. Because a lot of them, their grandfather or their mom or their aunt or somebody in their family did it, and they're already thinking about it. If they're running high school cross country, let me tell you, they're already thinking about it. And when they see the elites come through, that's one thing. But when they see the 40-year-olds, the 50-year-olds, the 60-year-olds who come through there that don't have the Galen Rupp bodies, that are going to finish this event because 90+% people finish, they are motivated by that. I tell sponsors, come by and watch the event because, they're, the local this or whatever. I said, come by and see. I said, you have an image in your head of this super fit man or woman who's crossing the line and a men just over 5 hours and the women under 6 hours. You don't see the heart and soul of the event that those aid station people go ape SHIT for the whole freaking day. They want them to succeed. Yeah. And you know what? And I talk about it. It's the magic. And they've done scientific studies on this that where they'll have people put their hand in freezing cold water. How long can you keep that hand in the water just on their own? How long can you do it with encouragement, with some coaches standing? You can do it. Hang on, fight. You can do it. Keep fighting. And you can do it. You can go farther when someone's cheering you on. So we got all these freaking high school kids and Boy Scouts, and they're going bananas. The Boy Scouts, to make sure they're not late, they go camp out there in the freezing cold the night before, wake up there. They are so into it. Jim Jardiner is an amazing Boy Scout leader, and he just loves the JFK. Absolutely. He makes his Boy Scouts get together and they make the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. My mom and her girlfriends, they were all in their 70s and 80s, used to make the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches we put on the aid stations. Well, my mom passed away a number of years ago, and we started buying Uncrustables. And Jim comes back to me, this boy who runs the aid station, and he says, we'll make those sandwiches. Man, they videotaped it last year. It was like a military operation. All these kids making these sandwiches. It was fantastic. And the enthusiasm, because they're thinking, I'm making this sandwich. Somebody who's thinking about maybe dropping out at 27 miles because I've gone a mile farther than a marathon. I still have almost a marathon to go, is going to eat that peanut butter jelly sandwich, start feeling better, and I'm going to help them get that better.
Oh, all you need is a little calories, That's if you're feeling down, just get some calories in you.
I told both my sons, I said, don't think about the distance. Just get to the next aid station. See what looks good. Maybe it's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Maybe it's need a Coke. I always tell people, I say, why do you have Coke at the aid station? Why Coca-Cola? Why Coca-Cola? Gatorade's been incredible with us, incredible. And they've got a really good product, the Gatorade Endurance Formula. I use it in my bicycle racing and long bike rides, Gatorade. But the Coca-Cola, we had the Coca-Cola. Why the Coca-Cola? I said, do you watch the Tour de France? I said, oh, yeah, I love it, man. It's incredible. Did you ever notice in all the advances and all the sports nutrition and all the drinks that are out there. What do those freaking bike racers pull out when they go up those climbs? They pull out a 12-ounce can of regular Coca-Cola and they drink it. That's what they're drinking.
It's pretty magic.
It's magic.
It's definitely a magic liquid.
That's what I told my sons too. I said, you're not going to go in there. Because I my one son is a big health nut. He doesn't drink alcohol. He doesn't drink sugar or anything. But I said, in the JFK, you're going to come into an aid station and that Coca-Cola is going to look like the greatest drink that ever happened. And Phil Steward, who literally wrote the book, Phil Steward, the race director of the Cherry Blossom 10 miler. Great man. He's done the JFK. Was an Olympic trials qualifier back in the 70s. And he just literally wrote the book on road race management. And he's been so helpful to me over the years and giving me advice. And since Buzz is gone and Greg's gone, sometimes I turn to him for advice. And I'll look, and I've read his book numerous times. And the number one reason that most events disappear is they can't attract enough volunteer help that they need in volunteer positions. We don't have that problem with the JFK. It's unbelievable. I mean, when people contact you, I'm saying, man, I'll try to find a spot for you, but we got it covered, And it's just, I pinch myself, it's like, and I'll go back to my dad. I'm lucky. Well, no, son, maybe you made your own luck by, getting the right kids involved, the right adults involved. But gosh, I can tell you, I said to somebody back in my day, and my longest training was 30 miles, 6 in the evening, 36. It wasn't 50 miles. I said, for me to get 50 miles done at an elite level and to contend for the win, the ingredient had to be love. It had to be love coming from somebody. It had to be, when I say love, I mean the love that came from somebody rooting for you, yelling for you, and telling you, you can do it. You can get through this. And I'm telling you, it was just like we keep talking about the magic of the JFK. You go, I look at people and go, I was done. Man, I was on the road and I was looking for that flashing light behind me in the SAG vehicle behind the last person just to scoop me up. And then somebody said something at the 46-mile aid station and they got back up on their horse, so to speak, and they got back in there and got it done. And, going back to these people doing volunteer stuff, Tim Mason. And Tim's 45 years old with 2 kids now. 25 years ago, he was one of the best junior college runners in the country. He was the national champion at 5,000 meters amongst junior college athletes. But when it gets close and he gets word on the radio that someone's right on the time cutoff, he doesn't send out a 16-year-old kid. He goes out himself and finishes up 45-year-old guy that hasn't raced in years. He goes out there and he literally calls all the splits, tells them what they have to do. We got to do a 15-minute and 20-second mile, or we're not going to make it. Here's what you got to do. And he brings them in. Every year he does that. And he's literally been up for 36 hours at that point. He does not sleep. He does Thursday night into Friday is his last sleep. He goes all the way through Friday night and then all the way through the 7:30 time cutoff on Saturday and then cleaning up the whole deal. And then it's usually about the post-race party, I'll catch him collapsing. And then he's the one who tells me in race management, no one relaxes until we know the course is clear. Every athlete is off the course. And then Tim gives me the thumbs up on that. And it's basically watching a prize fighter just collapse, Yeah. And that spills over into everyone, when they see Tim doing that, and 15, 17 years ago when he was throwing a box of bananas on one shoulder and a box of oranges and then running down to an aid station and giving it to him, he ain't that guy anymore. Okay. Time has marched on for all of us. I said, Tim, I started feeling into my 40s that throwing those tables around and doing some of that stuff was, maybe we need to delegate that to the 28, 30-year-olds, and everybody's got their pride. Oh, no. But
yeah. What percentage of the races new runners? We reached out to a handful of people and we said, what are you interested in us talking to Mike about? The question that came up a lot is, what would be the advice for new runners, particularly as we think about, there's clearly 3 distinct parts of the course, the AT, the towpath, and then the final road section. So how have you advised people, and how does that advice change for first timers versus a veteran, whether they've run it one or maybe a couple of times, to refresh their memory on something?
I will tell you this, over half the field, from year to year, over half the field is first timers. And so, they don't know. But I'm also saying the way we seed our numbers, the elite athletes will have, 1, 2, up to 30 or so. But then people with numbers under 200 are legends. They're people who have finished the race 10 times or more. They have that number. They have that number 1 21, whatever. There's somebody who knows the course, who's come back and done it multiple years, and they take great pride in helping first-timers get through. So I always tell people, start a conversation. Even if you're an introvert, just try to start a conversation with somebody with one of those lower numbers. And if their time goal is, within 15 or 30 minutes of what you're hoping to go in, and the same deal. A lot of first timers like, I don't know what I should be shooting for. It's a pretty simple formula we worked out. 4-hour marathon runners almost routinely who don't do anything really foolish or finish the JFK in about 10 hours. It's marathon times 2 plus 2 for the 4-hour marathon runner. Now, when you get to the 5-hour marathon, it's more like marathon times 2 plus 2.5. That's why I always tell people, if you haven't finished a marathon recently, or if you don't think your marathon fitness is under 5:15, I'm not saying you can't do it, but you're going to be cutting it close based on that formula. Now, the elite athletes, the David Sinclairs, it's marathon times 2 plus an hour and 15 minutes max. Those people are finishing in 5.5, 6.5 hours. Those people, it's a much more thing. So if you can figure out that formula, and then you start these conversations going. Well, my wife did it for the first time when she was 54 years old because she wanted to know what the runners were going through. She said, I've seen it, I've studied it, but I haven't done it. And it's like having a baby. You can tell somebody, but until you've had a baby, there's only one way. So, and she did that. She leaned on people. I said, go with Kathleen. Kathleen's finished the event 7 times.
So you're saying everybody with a number 200 and below has finished it at least how many times?
10.
10.
Yeah. The term legend.
That's a good inside nugget.
Yeah,
I didn't know
the term
that.
legend in the JFK means you have finished at least 10 times or more. We have a dinner the night before. It's the Legends dinner. Anybody can go. But if you have finished 10 times or more, you come as an invited guest. And you
I feel like I need to become a legend.
Yeah.
That's a coveted bid break.
It really is. And then, it's amazing because, I coach a guy named Paul Bechter. And Paul started doing the event. He was a local guy, started doing the event in his late 30s. And he finished 1 year. Done that. Been there, done that. He finished 35 consecutive years. Started in his late 30s, finished in his early 70s. 35 consecutive years. No weddings, no funerals, no illnesses, no graduations, no soccer state championships. Nothing stopped him from getting there all those times. And I said, Paul, when Paul finally did retire, I said, Paul, I don't want you to leave. I want you to hang around so you can be at the expo and mentor these people, point them towards you. This is Paul Bechter, finished 35 straight years in his 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You got a question for him? Now, I can't tell you how to break 6 hours. Maybe you come from me for that. But if you want to know how to weather the storm when your brain's always telling you, because people will tell me, what's your percentage of finishers? I go, it's normally 91, 92, sometimes as high as 94 is our record. Well, who are the 6% that drop out? I said, it's 2 types of people. It's normally very goal-oriented elite athletes who are not going to make the top 10, aren't going to do whatever it is, and they bail and they save it for the next event in 2 or 3 weeks. And then there are people, and it's not a fitness thing. They're so brilliant that they can't turn off the logical part of your brain. The logical part of your brain is the one that tells you just put your hand on a hot stove, get your hand off the hot stove. And that's going to come in somewhere when the glycogen is running out your body. This is not something you should be doing. Find the cave, the instinctual thing, find the cave, get in there, lay down for the night, replenish. And you have to override that. You have to be able to override that logical part. And for coaches, it's frustrating for me because I've had a few guys that haven't done well in the JFK, but they were just absolutely brilliant. I mean, they were like Rhodes Scholars type, and they just couldn't do that. And I even prepped them for it. I said, that's going to happen. It's going to happen somewhere, 27-mile aid station, 30, 35. It's going to come into your brain. That 15 miles is still a significant way to go, and my body is empty, and that intelligent voice in my brain is telling me enough's enough. I'm like, eat 2 cookies, grab a handful of M&Ms, pound down 12 ounces of Coke, and just don't listen to that. Don't listen, keep moving. So, but first timers, even before the gun goes off, peek around down there. When they're doing the countdown, 10 minutes to go, and they're singing the national anthem, peek around. And even congratulate them. Hey, wow, you're a legend. How many did you finish? I finished 11 times. I've written this number. What are you shooting for? 10 hours and 15 minutes. do you mind if I tag along with you for a while? No, come on. They love it. I can tell you,
Well,
my brother finished 21 times, and he was about a 12 and a half hour guy at the end. He loved it when people would come to him and ask him to be the Pied Piper and help them to lead them through this thing. And friendship.
Well, I think the thing that's really self-selecting about that is that not only is this person experienced, but you don't do something 10 times unless you love that course, unless you love this event, which means that they're going to love what that means and experiencing it and helping somebody else also experience it in the way that they have.
The only 2 times in the last 54 years that I wasn't involved with the race as a competitor, a volunteer, assistant race director, or race director, only 2 times I was a collegiate athlete. I was at the national championships. One time I was in Kenosha Park, Wisconsin on the day of the race. And one time I was in University of Rochester, hosted national championships. And that was only 2 times I hadn't been in Boonesboro on the course the day of. My heart was just longing. I raced my race that day. I couldn't wait to, the technology to get to a payphone and call somebody. How's everybody doing? Who won the race? Who's doing what? I couldn't wait to get back. It's like there was a writer one time who once said, who didn't know much about the JFK, but he got assigned the cover of the race. And he looked at it and says, everyone there, to them, there's nothing else in the entire world going on at that moment but that event. And those 1,200 people who are trying to get from downtown Boonesboro to Springfield Middle School, and now everybody wants them to succeed. Everybody wants them to make it. And it's magical. It's just like it's Christmas morning. And, it's very similar. The package is going to be opened up. What's going to happen? Oh my gosh, there's 2 women that are threatening 6 hours. You got to be kidding me. Ellie Greenwood, who people's names still, when Ellie Greenwood, you just bow, she won Western States, she won Comrades. Her JFK record stood for a decade, 6:12. Any woman who talk about running faster than 6:12, that's blasphemy. Now women are breaking 6 hours. You don't know what's going to happen. And now that that's been done, it's like the Roger Bannister thing. I'm sure other women are going to be, hey, you know what? I've kind of heard through some pretty reliable sources that some Olympic athletes who are not past their prime are thinking about coming in and trying for JFK records while they're still, in their day. And that just, like I said, that just gets my heart pumping. And, what's Christmas morning, what's going to be inside that package you open up. But I got to tell you, and I try to do this with sponsors. And I've been to the Boston Marathon as a coach. I ran there from 79, my first time. My last time was 1998. But I've taken athletes as a coach. And I've been at all points in the course. And I've been there when the leaders cross the line. And I've been there when the 5-hour people cross the finish line. And at Boston, when the leader comes in, it's bedlam. And when the 5-hour person crosses the finish line, it's not. Most of the people have left. It's a quiet the family, whatever. At the JFK, it's the exact opposite. When David Sinclair and Rachel Drake come in, there's a sprinkling of people there, the fans of the sport, the media and stuff like that. In the last hour of the event, when it's dark, and those people were finished in the last hour, in that 13th hour, in that magical 13th hour, the crowd there at the finish line is bigger than it's been the whole day. Locals are there, sponsors are there, people who don't even know anybody in the race are there to see these people doing this extraordinary thing, with ordinary skills, but minds that would,
Talked a bit about that when you were, you shared that with me when you were as a crew, that you just kind of felt how much the community was out.
Compared to a lot of other ultras that I've coached at or crewed or run, I think JFK had what seemed to me the most community involvement of the number of people that I talked to that were just locals.
Yeah.
And there were people that were, you were sort of towards the front of the pack. So I was kind of moving along with the people that were trying to see the winners come through.
Yeah.
But it was great to just see so many people in the community that really cared.
Oh my gosh. It's just backwards. So the most excitement is not in the first hour. It's a crescendo that builds. That 10th hour starts getting a little crazy. Then the 11th hour. Then the 12th, that 13th hour when and then we're calculating it out. People are, watching, using their devices to see so-and-so's out. They got 3 miles to go. They got 47 minutes to make it, that type of thing. It is just so exciting and just going bonkers. And it's like when that last person comes in and you see the emergency vehicle that was behind him, the flashing lights, you're almost disappointed. It's like once you see that, if you're of a certain age, you can just really enjoy that and feel good about our species. But if you're like somebody who's still got some juice in the tank, because I've had some 50-year-old women that were there volunteering and go, why not? Why can't I start getting in shape? Why can't I come back here? And that's the beauty of the 13 hours. You do the math on it. And you get on the treadmill and you start walking 15 minutes a mile. Well, yeah, it's not too fast. Now you got to maintain that for over 12 and a half hours, but it's not impossible,
What have you, so you've been doing this for over 30 years. When you reflect back on these years, and I'm sure people listening, ourselves, and you, maybe not your family, but maybe your family, hope that you will continue for several years to come. But what do you think is the number one thing that this has brought you personally? Like, having done this and experienced this, how has it allowed you to grow as a human?
Man, that's a really good question, Matt. And I've done a lot of these podcasts, and I don't know if I've been asked that before. But I got to tell you, sometimes it's a heavy burden. I don't want to let Buzz Sawyer down. I don't want to let the event down. And so I'll be quite honest with you. Sometimes it's a burden. But I got to tell you, the old Beatles thing, I'll get by with a little help from my friends. Man, it sure does look good when you look to 400-some plus volunteers who are out there trying to help you out. And even some of them send me messages in the middle of the year. Hey, let me know if there's something I can do to help you out, there.
Can you elaborate a little bit on, as real an answer as you're willing to share, of like, help us understand a bit more of that burden? I think part of why we started this podcast is to really dig into how people advance the sport.
Yeah.
So I'd love to understand a bit more about what that burden is for you, because I think from the outside we see all of your excitement in this time that we've been talking to is not only clear, it's infectious. And I suspect that for anybody showing up, you never let them see the burden. I cannot imagine that you ever let anybody, maybe some close confidants, but most people, I suspect, don't see that. So to the extent that you're willing to share, I'd love to know how has that impacted you?
Matt, let me use a different word: obligation. And I remember hearing this one with boxers who came out of retirement. They did not want to get punched in the face anymore, but they had obligations. And who's your obligation to? My obligation is to that 14-year-old kid at that aid station who wants to come do this event after he goes. I wanted to be here. And I'm not going to mention the events, but I've seen events that cognizant they just said, that's it. We're not going to do it next year. We're going to take a break. And you know how breaks are. Breaks are when somebody takes a break from grad school, they never go back, And I don't want to happen that with the JFK. I feel obligated, like Buzz did, to make this thing happen so that people who did it in the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s, that their grandchildren can come back and do it. We've had third generation people coming back. So I'm going to use that word more than that burden. Let me take that word back. An obligation. I feel obligated to keep this going. But I got to tell you, you talk about rewarding. And once again, I'm not going to mention names out of privacy. But I've seen women that have gone through horrible divorces where some jerk of a guy dragged them through a horrible divorce. And they were in a bad place and they needed something in their life. And they decided the JFK was going to be it. And they come through that and they set their goal on that and they accomplish this. And it's like, you know what? I just made it through the most difficult day of my life. I can make it through anything. And I told my sons both that. Both my sons were not runners. Neither of them done a marathon when they did JFK. And I said, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is going to be the single most difficult day of your life. Okay? I'm not going to sugarcoat you. But
if you do it right, I think it definitely.
You're going to go back to your bed tonight and you're going to sleep in the same bed that you woke up this morning. It's going to be a very, very difficult day and you can weather the storm. If you do, it's something you're going to take great pride in the rest of your life. When you see those bumper stickers around the United States and abroad that say JFK 50, you'll get a nice little smile and feel good knowing I did that. I was one of the small percentage of people. And I've got a really brilliant finish line announcing crew. And one of them did the race. He was a bicycle racer, built for bicycle racing, a big, thick dude. But he decided he wanted to do it when he was age 50. And he finished in 13 hours. And me and him are kind of like, we're friends, but we're not huggy type guys. It was the only time we ever hugged. He hugged me and wept on me, and I embraced him. And we had that moment. We joke about it, because he's 60. He just turned 60 now. When he did it, he was 50. I said, I'm not hugging you anymore. You got your one hug. Moments like that. And I got to tell you, when people say, is there any moment with the JFK that stands out more than any other? And I've seen these Eric Sensman, who won the race in 2017. Nobody wanted to win more than him. And on paper, he shouldn't have won. And when he did, he was overcome by emotion. Like, I understood. Because only me and Greg Schenk thought I was going to win that race in 1982. I understood that what was going on in his heart. And I told him, I said, for the rest of your life, I whispered to him, for the rest of your life, you are the 2017 JFK 50-mile champion. And on the other side of it, Ian Torrance, who wanted to win that race more than anything else. And in 2004, he was going to do it. He was going to win. And then Paul South, who was doing his first ultra, came in there with 404 mile speed, beat him in the last mile. And Ian whipped in my arms, and, you know, he's not my biological son, but he's like a son to me. And those are memorable moments. But I will tell you, I'm sitting at the finish line and we're watching. And I mean, when Goggins crossed the finish line one year, David Goggins wearing no shirt with this incredible body. And my announcers was like, whoa, man. I knew who he was, okay? So that's those bodies that are, now that's not the everyday dude. That's David Goggins' body, okay? But I'm sitting there watching people come in, and you're seeing these atypical bodies. You're seeing guys who, you know, probably didn't get recruited by colleges, and gals who, you know, whatever it is, but they get it done. But I'm watching the finish line, and I want to say this was 2017, 2018, in that range. And I see a guy cross the finish line with a titanium leg all the way to his hip. And we'd had people with that had amputees below the knee, but I'd never seen anyone who would. And I'm thinking to myself, the first thing I go is, how did he get down Weaverton Cliffs? How did he get down Weaverton Cliffs? Not just finish the race in the daylight. How did he get down Weaverton Cliffs? And I was like, I'm a salesman at heart, and I wanted to go up this guy. I didn't want to be insulting, but I said, hey, I'm Mike Spinnler, I'm race director. I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. And he was so accommodating. Adam Popp, who's broken Guinness Book of World Records. He's won his division at the Boston Marathon. He's an absolute legend in the sport. He lost his leg trying to disarm a bomb for the Air Force, trying to save lives, and then took a bad situation and turned it around. But he told me this story, that he really didn't know too much about that 14.5 to 15. He didn't know the logistics of it. He wasn't going to be able to do it. I guess he was going to have to take off the artificial leg and go down hopping. And people around him saw his predicament. And people got in front of him, and people got behind him. And they went down in a 20-plus minute mile to help him get down that. No one knew each other. Not a word was spoken. These people just bonded. Once they saw that he was back on level ground, he was okay, they went on their ways. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. I said, that's the greatest story I've ever heard in the history of the JFK. And I never was able to find those people. They weren't out there looking for anybody to pat them on the back. They just knew that it was the right thing to do. And they were helping this guy get that medal. It was just, I still get teary-eyed thinking about it. It's just the best of our species. You know, there's so.
I know, you got me.
Yeah.
I mean,
my eyes are sweating.
I can't. My wife gets on me because I watch a lot of sports and I watch a lot of ESPN. I said, Maria, when I watch the regular news, it breaks my heart every day. I can almost not deal with it. But then you see a real life situation with people doing that, and I was like, you know what? There is hope for our species. There really is. And Adam has mentored my son. One of the reasons my son is in the Air Force right now is because Adam mentored him, and he chose that decision after college. And but it's just great people. And I always tell, when I'm talking to a sponsor, I said, sponsor the event. And then if someone comes in and on their resume it says JFK finisher, do yourself a favor and hire them, because they're extraordinary. They're the problem solvers. They're the people overcome. They're the people who are going to work overtime when nobody else wants to work overtime. They're going to be the team players. They are the best of the best. And that's why whenever I see one of them bumper stickers, I don't want, sometimes as time goes by in my senior years, my golden years, these are the guys I train with, we call it our golden years, as we go into, past Medicare and some guys are checking out, assisted living situations and stuff like that, is the pride that we have and the things that we did that were good things that you feel good about. Now, we all made mistakes in our lives and we all feel good about them, but the things that we did were good. And when I'm sitting in a parking lot out in Eugene, Oregon, and there's a local running store having a fun run, and I'm seeing the cars come in with the JFK bumper stickers on. And I'm just sitting there, my wife and my kids are going to run. I'm going to go for a bike ride. And I'm like, I feel really good about that. And at that moment, I don't want them to know I'm the JFK race director. If they would come up and recognize me, of course, I'd be cordial and talk to them, but I like just kind of being invisible at that moment, but know that they did this event and they have such great pride that they stick the bumper sticker on their car. 3,000 miles away from the races, there's the bumper sticker, so it's a great thing. And I said, I feel really good that there's a safety net there, that this race has a future. Me and Maria do a lot of traveling, and God forbid we go down in a plane crash. We know that our boys are going to be okay, and we know the race is going to be okay. And there's a plan in place. But it's, and some people, you just don't know the magic until you're there.
You do it.
Until you do it. Until you stand in downtown Boonesboro, until you're sitting there afterwards and you got the medal and you're telling war stories with people at the finish line, you go, that was a heck of a day, man. I'm never going to forget that day. Never going to forget it. Yeah.
So to be respectful of your time, I've got maybe one or two more questions, and we'll wrap up. But
I'm just going to be watching the U.S. Open tennis. I won't be watching news. I'll be watching sports.
I had so many. We had so many questions about what doesn't get old, and your key moments, and you shared so many of them, and I really appreciate you doing that. I don't know I don't think I've asked this before, so tell me if I've asked this, and I am getting old and curmudgeon.
You're amongst friends, Matt. You're amongst friends.
Yeah. But doing this must have changed you in some way or impacted how you view life. You talk about, you have hope, and it's you talk with a lot of hope about people.
Yeah.
When you
about our
share these
species.
experiences, but how has it changed you?
1984 Olympics. Daley Thompson, who had won the gold medal decathlon in 1980 and then did it again in 84. And he stood there and he was being interviewed. Arguably the greatest athlete in the planet. And he pointed out to the athletes celebrating in the opening closing ceremonies, the 8 or 12,000 athletes that are out in the fields. And he said, if we were running the world, there'd be a lot less problems. And I thoroughly believe that. I think there's a certain thing that athletics, specifically ultramarathoning and an event like the JFK does for making us forget our differences, our political affiliations, our little things that people like to argue about. You forget about it and you see the similarities, and that we are really just one tribe. When I was coaching collegiately a number of years back, we had athletes from all over the world. And I said, right now, we don't have guys from South Korea. I don't have guys from Somalia. I don't have guys from Virginia and Alabama. We're one tribe. I am one 45-year-old man who's leading you, and we're one tribe. And I sense that with the JFK, and it does change me. It gives me hope. And to the point where sometimes you get so discouraged and that you think, man, do we really have a chance? Is the atomic bomb, is the nuclear war just going to end it or are we going to get past this? And I just think when people do stuff like this, when you come out of your comfort zone, and I'm a sports guy, and I'm not going to lie to people. And there's a lot more people who aren't sports people, and they go, why? And I'm going back to what Daley Thompson said. If it's sportsmen's, the origin of sport was when when there was no war going on, that the warriors, they created games, races, boxing, wrestling, throwing things. They created games to keep the warriors busy when there was no war. How about we keep the warriors busy all the time and there's no more wars? That's the origin of sports. That's why I love sports so much, because in a perfect world, we don't have our young men and young women dying on battlefields because old men are telling them that's the right thing to do and it's the patriotic thing to do. And I love the military guys in a race, and it's not possible without them, but wouldn't it be great if they only had to prepare for races, only had to prepare for a triathlon or an adult lacrosse league or whatever it is? How much would that, and what I do, I feel a little piece I've contributed to that. And I do feel good about that. My wife, she made it real clear. I married a very, very devout Catholic girl. And I went to church when my dad told me I had to go to church, okay? And when I was no longer living in the house, I stopped going to church. My wife made it real clear. If we get married, you're going to go to church. And if we have children, you're going to go to church. You're going to be with me. So I do, and I go there. And I'm probably the biggest skeptic in the but I do pray. And I do think, and I think about, you know what? Do you feel good about the time? And I'm the math guy too. I'm the stat guy. 36,525 days. That's what 100 years is. And if you're lucky enough to get to 100, what did you do with that time? Did you do something worthwhile? Did you do something that carries on after you're gone? I can tell you, Buzz Sawyer did. and Greg Shank did. And I'm just hoping that I do too. And not that I could ever wear the shoes of Greg Shank or Buzz Sawyer. As I said to somebody recently, the last 33 years, I've been doing my best Buzz Sawyer impression, the best I can do. And I fail sometimes, I fail, but we all can try to start our best. But you know what?
Yeah.
When you do it right, it's not just a foot race. It's not just a foot race. Maybe that kid who was thinking about dropping out of school stays in school because they had a cross country team, and maybe ends up, I got an athlete right now that I'm working with that went through a dark period in his life. He went through some substance abuse, and he's clean now, and he's driven to run fast in the JFK. That's his addiction. He replaced the negative addiction with a positive addiction, and we provided that avenue. We've provided that. I feel really good about that, and my accountant reminds me this all the time. We're a nonprofit, so we're a charity. But with the proceeds from the event, we've done real well. And, we've been able to donate over $1 million to very worthwhile charities, to the Salvation Army, to the Wounded Warriors, to Team Red, White, and Blue, to the military groups that I feel very, very strongly about. I didn't serve in the military. I had an opportunity. I had a brother who served in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. I had a brother who was in the Navy and was a Vietnam veteran. And I had a chance to be in special services, to run for the Marine Corps, to basically be a full-time pro athlete. And I went a different way. I ran for a track club out of Washington, D.C. instead of going that way. And in a way, I've told my sons I have very few regrets, but I do regret not serving. So in my compensation for that, I try to help those groups that serve those young men, those women who did step up and serve. And I'm glad that we can help them. I'm glad that the race has been successful, that sponsorships like Ultras come in and says, we like what you're doing. We want to help you. We want to help you fill a scholarship fund, the track and field program at the community college that I ran for, 49 years ago now. We're able to help that program, help out local kids who might not otherwise get an education. So there's a lot of good that comes out of the JFK, a lot of good, and I feel good about that. And so does my, yeah. And really, when you talk about race management, we're already doing stuff now that has to be done for 2026. It has to be done 15 months out. It isn't like it's nonstop like that. But
I was curious what the
lead time is.
What the lead time is, and it sounds like it's you are in the almost year and a half.
Yeah, and it never stops. So there's deadlines almost every day, year round. But you know what? I didn't invent it. Buzz Sawyer did it for a third of a century before I did, and Buzz didn't have nearly the staff that I do.
No, but the world's gotten more complicated with permits and all of the volunteers and all of the things that you need to get approvals from the local community. And I think it's a testament, to, we've talked about this a bit, but to have the buy-in from I don't think you could do this without the buy-in of the community, because they would either just revolt or they would do whatever they could to stop you from getting permits. And there's many things that I think if the community is disgruntled enough with how you run things, they absolutely could make it difficult. But you clearly have the support of the community. We see that it's evident, it's very clear and obvious.
Many events. Les Kenyon was this legendary race director in Baltimore, and Les was a visionary. He was doing stuff in the 70s that most race directors didn't start doing till the next century. And he got snuffed out. His events got snuffed out by red tape in the late 1990s. And nobody was wise enough to realize how much of an economic impact his events had until it was over. And then they brought him back. And they brought back the Baltimore Marathon. Then they brought back all these events. But there's a lot of events. If it doesn't meet their criteria for what they have to do as far as road closures and police services and so forth, if it doesn't meet a certain criteria, that event's ended. And I feel terrible for those race directors, but it's tough. But I think we're in a good place right now. I mean, I'm hearing like Philadelphia Marathon's already sold out. I'm hearing Richmond's already sold out, not just the Bostons and the New Yorks and the Chicagos, but so it's a healthy time. But I think that's a good thing to do it.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day Bakline will take that mantle of your title sponsorship. We'll see.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to cover, Molly?
We did have a request from one of our athletes running. What part of the course do you think you mentally have to most prepare for?
It's tiny, but I'm telling you, it can be a backbreaker. Everybody knows about the JFK. I've heard a number of coaches approach the preparation of their athlete and the execution as a triathlon. But we're not going to swim. Yeah. You're not going to swim, bike, and run, but you're going to do the mountain section. Then the towpath is
there's definitely three parts of the race.
The towpath is a flat, smooth surface. Some people it's psychologically crippling because it's so mundane and monotonous. To me, I loved it because it was like running on an old dirt track with no hills. But then you get off on the road. And a lot of people aren't prepared. When you get off that road, there's a nasty...
Oh, there's that very steep hill.
It's only 200 meters. I've measured it over and over again because you think it's much, much longer.
Oh, yes.
I measure it all the time. I go out there with my bike and I'll look and I'll go, yeah, that's it. It's only 12/100 of a mile. It's only 200 meters. But it's so steep and it's so demoralizing. And be prepared for that.
Because you still have almost 10 miles. And I think that like any... it's always right. It's like this has been studied as well, right? Of the whatever 3/4 is of the thing is like the hardest. It doesn't matter what the distance is. It could be the third lap of a mile. It could be 2.2 of a 5K. It could be it's whatever. So mile 40, which is about when you come out. I can't remember exactly what it's about. Right? It's
41.8. Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you still have a decent amount left.
Yeah.
And so it can definitely, I totally agree. That can definitely be, I think, a bit.
Tell them just to be prepared. But once again, to use psychology as your tailwind.
Yeah.
Once you get over that, that's it. That's it. It's just distance now. Now it's 8.2 miles to go, and that's behind me. But I'm telling you, I've known the race to get broken up there for the leaders. I've seen the race get broken up just in that matter of seconds for the leaders. They're only on it for less than a minute. The average person's on it for 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm telling you, be prepared for that. But kind of like, hey, Rocky, be ready for.
It's a hard transition. Yeah, it's a hard transition because you feel like you're you've obviously been on this towpath for a significant amount of time.
Yeah,
and then you have this like hard right off, and then up the hill. And
I think anytime you're transitioning from a soft surface back onto road that late in a race is also, it's just painful at that point.
Yeah, it's jarring. It's definitely mentally and physically jarring.
And listen, you guys did a great job. And I really appreciate some of the subjects you brought up that I haven't answered. I've done a lot of podcasts and you guys brought up some stuff that I haven't talked about before. But I got to tell you what we do, once again, we try to play these psychological things. And I like how bicycle racing, once you get to a certain point, it's countdowns. It's 20K to go. It's 10K to go. It's all that stuff. The 1 kilometer to go flag. That's what we do with the JFK. So the sign doesn't say 42.2. It says 8 miles to go. 8, 7, and you count it down.
I do remember. I do remember that.
You count it down.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna let a little surprise out. Is bicycle racing, they're so precise, they do it with 100 meters to go. We're actually going to have signs this year to go 400, 300, 200, 100. Just in case we get that person who's cutting it really close, they know, ooh, I need to kick this last 300 meters, one of those deals.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's a lot of hard work, but it's so worthwhile. But when we have a successful event, it's like, gosh, we pulled this off, we did it again, and
my final question is, and this comes from Kit, the other person that he's actually part of our team here at Bakline. He's going to be running it this year.
His first ultra.
He just crewed me for Vermont 100, and he's got the bug. So we're excited for him. But he was curious about, and I think this it's a great question that I think a lot of people have is. Biggest mistakes or pacing general mistakes that you see people make early on, particularly for a first timer. I know we've talked about some of the important parts of the race, but are there things that you see commonly? And again, I know you mentioned that the DNFs often either come from, people who can't get out of their own way or elites, but beneath that surface, what else are you seeing that somebody listening who's interested in starting, or they're going to be starting, and maybe they're coming to our event, and we can share this in a week from now. What is it that you think they could benefit from, and just being cognizant of in advance?
And your athlete's Kit?
Yeah.
I'm speaking directly to you, Kit, right now. Okay. Has Kit done a marathon?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
many.
so
Yeah.
Kit's done it. I got to tell you, I told people, I think,
I think he's a good stand-in for. I think he's a good stand-in for a lot of people that we talk to. But he will appreciate that you're talking directly to him.
I did a clinic a few weeks ago, and it was a bunch of first timers, and we talked to them. And I told them personally, I found a marathon much more difficult to prepare for than an ultra marathon. So tell him to kind of, Kit, relax, and don't be bound by splits. That I need to be this at Gatlin Gap at 9.3 miles. I need to be this at the Weaverton transition to the towpath. Mm-hmm. Don't be bound into that stuff. Kind of enjoy it with a relaxed, almost a non-competitive mentality. And then once you get to a position, and for a lot of people, the Frederick Steeplechasers do an amazing job at the 19.1 mile aid station. It's exactly 50 kilometers from the finish line. It's 31.1 to go. And that's also, if you've done that, if you've approached it with a relax and you get there, and their aid station is incredible. You'll have a smorgasbord of things to pick from. And at that point, you can like, you know what? Now I'm going to start racing a little bit. Now I'm going to start maybe try to pick up a little more time between now and the next aid station. But if anything, the common mistakes I see from first timers is because they're driven by a goal, and that goal should be to finish. Okay, it's not going to matter really. I can tell you. And I don't want to belittle somebody who comes in there that's run like a 3-hour marathon that, hey, based on the formula, I should be able to do 7 hours and 30 minutes, 7 hours, 45 minutes into this. I don't want to belittle or discourage them doing that, but I'm just saying you're going to have a much more enjoyable and probably productive if you can just kind of hold back the racing until you get to at least 19 miles.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, to kind of bring this full circle and bring this to a close, you said that your winning of the race and getting the course record was not focusing on the course record. It was all of the other things. I think not having that be the driving force and focusing on the mile ahead, the aid station ahead is just, I think, good strategy. And if you focus on that and execute each aid station well, then you will have probably the best time that you can have.
Yes. And I got to tell you, bicycle racing's in my family. My mother's father, my grandfather, my mother's side was an elite level bicycle racer, raced on the velodromes in the early 1900s. It's kind of like in my blood. And I take a lot of philosophy from bike racing into ultra running. And Chad Rickliffs, who won our race in 2001, Chad was a Category 1 bicycle racer, which is really, really good. It's borderline domestic pro. And so there's some similarities. And bicycle racing have this recon mentality. I'm going to go in, I'm going to recon that course. I'm going to go ride the 7th stage of the Tour de France in March to get a good look at it. I tell first-time JFKers, come in and recon the race. Recon it. Your first year, approach it as a reconnaissance mission. See it, understand it, know what it is, know where that nasty hill is when you come off the towpath, know how severe it is, that kind of stuff. And then come back, maybe the next year or 2 years later, and then hit a home run. Then have after, but go in with more of a recon mentality your first time. Yeah. Kit, I'm rooting for you. Kit, I hope you put that gold medal around your neck. Just so you know, they ask me questions about the medals. The JFK is, we kind of borrowed, we borrow things from Boston sometimes. We borrow things from comrades. But, everyone gets this gorgeous medal, which I think sometimes is better than an Olympic medal. We really spent some time designing this medal. And we decided to make the first 100 men and the first 100 women make their medal gold. And you really don't know. You're guessing, unless you got a really good coach who's yelling at you, you're 97th, and you can't, that type of deal. But that's fun too. And, and one of those insider things. And I always tell people, why do you do that? And I said, it was kind of something that comrades did. It doesn't belittle the silver medal. It just adds a little more flavor to it. Mike Mullennan, who was the drummer for the Goo Goo Dolls, and then he was a drummer in Nashville for a long time. And, he's this famous musician. And me and Mike developed a friendship over the years. And he brought us great publicity. He would mention us in interviews and stuff like that. And he loved the event. He's done it 9 times. Mike, if you're listening, he's done it 9 times. He's got to come back at his 10th so he can become a legend. But he was so into getting in the top 100. He was, what it was the year before, 8 hours or whatever it was going to take. He was so focused on that. He wanted a top 100 finish. And the gold medals, I was thinking, let's make it special. let's go ahead that a little bit, And Julie Hughes recently wrote a book, and she's going to release it in October. And she asked me to write a foreword for it. And she's a very talented writer. And she got the bug for the JFK, run Boston, got the bug for JFK. And she came in and she was driven to get one of those gold medals. And the whole time in the event, she was assuming the next woman in front of her was the 100th woman. And she used this psychologically to help her.
Yeah.
So anyway, but Kit, enjoy the race, recon it. Don't get fired up until you get to at least the 19.1 mile aid station, and make sure you eat. They usually make these JFK cookies, and I don't know. I always take a picture of it and then eat it. I want to have a memory.
We'd be remiss if you can give a shout out to Kelly. She's the other person that's running, that is our athlete. So in addition to Kit, we have Kit and Kelly. So if you can wish Kelly good luck as well.
Kelly, listen, I hope that you fall in love with this race like so tens of thousands of people have, and that you have.
I have, yeah.
And please kind of come and find me. I'll be at the finish line in the announcer's trailer. And so, Kelly, once you get that medal, I'd like to meet you personally.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Well, I have no idea how I'm going to edit this episode because we've been.
Why would you?
I don't think I will. I think that Mike, you speak so eloquently about the race and your experience, and I was thinking halfway through and almost started chuckling to myself of like, I don't think I need to edit much out. In fact, I'm not sure I do, because part of, I think, what makes this conversation so great is that people can see and understand how much this matters.
Yeah.
And if I started editing out some of the things that could be considered tangents, I think it actually loses part of the reason why this race is so great.
Yeah.
And it's because every single detail, and you've got this, you have a seemingly endless number of names and people and that have contributed, and what they've done and what their history is, and how they have impacted this race. And I don't want to edit that out, because then people will lose the fact that this is a race, not just that Mike Spinnler race directs, and that 1,000 people run, and that 90% of those people finish, and that there's how many volunteers? There's five.
Well over 500. Right? Well over 400.
Yeah,
that's just on race day. That's just on race day.
Yeah. And so it's far beyond that. It's actually the decades of people who have made their mark over time, that without which it would be difficult to imagine the JFK that you have today. So congratulations on not only your long tenure, but in, I think, being a shining example of a really good steward of this race. And I think not just that you are doing it, but how you do it is, I think, really important. And I know I appreciate it. I think I speak on behalf of our listeners and Molly and Kit and Kelly, just how much I think the community and we appreciate it. So thank you so much. Any parting words from yourself at the risk of this being another 20 minutes?
No, I'll keep this short, but I will tell you this. I reached this point in life, and I remember my dad. When my dad was in his late 60s, and gosh, and sometimes young men and their fathers come have conflicts, but we had reached a point in life where we have a wonderful relationship, and he really opened his heart to me, and he was very reflective at that time. And I find myself doing the same thing, reflecting, and I think back to that scene in Saving Private Ryan, when the soldier goes back to the graveyard decades later, and he looks at his wife, because those guys had given their lives. And the Tom Hanks character says to Private Ryan, earn this, earn this. And decades later, he asks his wife, tell me I've been a good man. Like, did I earn this? Did I deserve this time that these guys gave me? And I'm reflecting back on life like this. And I think of my dad so often, things that he said to me, so encouraging things that still echo through my mind, even though he left this world 40 years ago. And I sit and I wonder, if my brother Bill had come from California for the JFK, if he'd come from California to win a golf tournament, and I've been reading about this golf tournament and watching it, how different my life would be. Really, honestly, it was that's how I got involved. I idolized my brother. I'd seen his medals. I wanted to be, and then if it had been golf, And I don't think it'd have been worse. It just would have been different, an alternate universe or whatever. And I will say this. It breaks my heart to see events come to an end. And I just want to throw this to any race directors who might be listening. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world, let me tell you. But I'm just saying, if you can find people who are doing your event that are young, that are in their 20s, in their 30s, that love your event, get them involved. Get them involved because they will carry it. Trust me. Father Time is undefeated. And you'll blink your eyes and you're not going to be 47 anymore and you're going to be 67. And you're going to say, I wish I'd got somebody involved. Do it now. Get young people. And not to pat myself on the back too hard, but I've been successful in that, getting people who fell in love with the event and getting them involved. And their passion is even exceeding mine now. I mean, I love it when they start spouting statistics, when they start thinking, when they start talking about the year 2062 and what is the 100th JFK going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thank you so much for inviting me to do your podcast.
Yeah, I really
thank you.
Yeah,
this was great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing you guys in a couple months.
Yeah.
Yeah.